It's not giving me power. What's going on?
What do you mean? I was looking at the engine instruments and they didn't make sense to me because we were asking for full power, but the engine instruments were not giving us any power at all.
What's going on?
What?
Flight 38 is crippled in the worst way imaginable,
Well, it looks like we have double engine failure.
with neither engine providing enough power. The jet won't make it to the airport. With 152 people on board, Flight 38 is falling toward London with only seconds until it hits the ground. November 4th, 2008. A Learjet 45 is cruising over central Mexico.
Victor Mike Charlie, radar contact, descend to 200.
200, Mike Charlie.
Alvaro Sanchez and Martin Oliva are at the controls. Both pilots are captains. But tonight, Captain Oliva is flying the plane.
I'll start setting 250, Alvaro, okay?
Sounds right to me.
The flight is a special government charter.
We must be getting close.
The country's interior minister and his entourage are flying to Mexico City. The politicians are on their way back to the capital after a day of talks aimed at combating the nation's skyrocketing rate of violent crime. The Mexican government has chartered a Learjet 45 for the flight. It's a high-performance aircraft that's also economical to fly.
Victor Mike Charlie, descend to 15,000 feet. Altimeter 3024.
15,000 with 3024, Mike Charlie. 1,000 feet until we level off.
Thanks, Alvaro.
As the Learjet nears the outskirts of Mexico City, the pilots prepare to land.
Landing lights. Yep. Check.
Victor Mike Charlie, reduce your speed to 180 knots.
Reducing speed to 180, Mike Charlie.
The air traffic controller asks the Learjet crew to slow down to maintain their position in the lineup of planes.
Should I pull the nose up?
No, leave it. Leave it for now.
Tonight, Alvaro Sanchez is serving as something of a mentor.
But we're about to level off, right?
Yes.
He's more experienced in the Learjet than Captain Oliva.
There, speed stabilized.
Okay.
This is one of the busiest and most critical stages of any flight.
Flap down.
Sanchez extends the flap so he can further reduce their speed.
Give me 8800, please.
8800.
Below them, Mexico City is a sprawling metropolis of 20 million people, with some of the worst traffic in the world. A sea of cars fills the downtown district.
Oh my God!
Without warning, the Learjet goes into a steep dive and plummets toward the ground.
What do we do?
Give it to me! Give it to me!
The first officer calls for control of the plane.
It's yours, Alvaro!
He hauls his control column back, trying to pull the plane out of the dive. Ulrika Bjorkstam is in the street below, waiting for a cab.
All of a sudden, I saw this plane flying like really low. I had the time to turn around and I started running away from it. But of course, the plane was a little bit faster than what I was. I remember thinking that, well, this is it. This is it for me.
Investigators from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau arrive in Learmonth.
In the cabin, there was quite a lot of damage, mainly to the ceiling panels and the ceiling fixtures.
Investigators hope data from the plane's quick access recorder can shed light on what went wrong. They focus on the fly-by-wire control system.
I'm seeing 2 abrupt changes in the elevator's position at cruise. Looks like that's what caused the pitch downs.
Were those commands coming from the pilots?
Oh, they weren't.
Weird.
Navire 1 fault. That's not right.
It seems the plane's fly-by-wire system was sending rogue commands to the flight control surfaces.
What the hell is going on?
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Hey.
Investigators need to hear the pilot's story.
We went through everything that they recalled and anything unusual in the period beforehand.
Describe the flight leading up to the pitch downs. Anything that could have caused these erratic movements.
They had a pretty good recollection, but had no explanations as to why this happened.
And you were getting a lot of faults.
Oh, yeah. There were a few. Have a look for yourself. It's like the plane had a mind of its own.
The A330's post-flight report logs all the cautions and warnings that were affecting the plane. They studied the list, looking for anything that might connect the various warnings.
The first question you have is, what's the common element between all these?
All these errors are connected to Ataru 1.
The ADIRU, or Air Data Inertial Reference Unit, relays important information to the flight computers about the environment outside the plane.
That Ataru obviously became an important part of the puzzle because it was associated with so many faults.
Look at this. I've never seen anything like it.
They spot something highly unusual.
These are wild angle of attack fluctuations coming from AOA 1.
Angle of attack, or AOA, is the angle of the plane's wing relative to airflow. The higher the angle, the less smooth the airflow over the wing.
And if the aircraft angle of attack gets too high, then the aircraft can stall. So it's a very important parameter.
From over 50 degrees nose up, back to level, then negative 50 degrees.
That's not what the pilots described at all.
The crew testified that the plane pitched nose down twice. They never said it pitched up.
What do the elevator readings say?
10 degrees nose down.
He checks other FDR readings that record the plane's pitch. That data also confirms what the crew reported.
Show me the angle of attack again.
From the flight data recorder information, we could see that the elevators moved in a nose-down direction, about 10 degrees. There was an abrupt rate of change.
The plane did not pitch up. There's no way this AOA data is correct.
What would faulty data like this do to an A330?
I'm not sure, but I bet it's not good. Let's go ask Airbus.
Continental Airlines Flight 1404 is being prepped for its departure from Denver, Colorado. Captain David Butler and First Officer Chad Levang will pilot the flight to Houston. The plane is a Boeing 737, a short to medium-range twin-engine jet that has become the best-selling commercial jetliner in history.
Continental 1404, Denver.
Tower, runway 34 right, position and hold.
Position and hold 34 right, Continental 1404.
Runway 34 right is one of 6 runways at Denver International.
Continental 1404, wind 270 at 27.
Turn right, heading 020.
Runway 34 right is cleared for takeoff.
The controller provides the pilots with a runway wind reading of 27 knots and clears them for takeoff.
Heading 020, cleared for takeoff, runway 34 right, Continental 1404.
plane veers hard to the left. The plane races off the runway at a speed of more than 100 miles an hour. It's completely out of control.
Reject! Reject!
The plane hits a steep ridge, sending it airborne. Flight 1404 finally comes to a stop 700 feet from the runway. All 110 passengers and 5 flight crew narrowly escaped death. The captain is seriously injured. The first officer's injuries are minor. The question now is, how could this have happened in the first place? Before the crash, XL Airways Flight 888, the captain tries to fly out of trouble. He increases power while pushing his side stick forward to bring the nose down. It's a textbook maneuver to prevent stalling, but it doesn't work. The plane continues to pitch up until it loses lift and falls from the sky. Investigators need to know why. The flight plan calls for flying the plane through a series of 35 in-flight tests that make up what's known as an acceptance flight.
Okay, get your power and idle.
A computer simulation helps investigators analyze Flight 888's final flight check.
Okay, here we go.
Captain Keppel deliberately slows his plane down for the test, but the computer lets the speed drop too far, below the minimum needed to keep the plane in flight. Investigators notice a warning on the cockpit flight display moments before the crash.
There. What is that?
They learn that the warning is supposed to alert the pilots the flight computer is no longer helping to fly the plane. It is switched to full manual mode. The warning comes on when the plane's computer gets conflicting information. The frozen sensors are telling the computer the plane is flying level, while other onboard sensors are relaying its extreme nose-up attitude. One must be wrong.
The plane gave the pilot control right here.
It seems the crew of Flight 888 either didn't see or didn't understand the warning being sent by the computer.
Stick forward!
The pilot uses his side stick to try to lower the nose.
Stick forward!
In manual mode, that's just not enough. The crew also needs to adjust the trim wheel for a more dramatic change of pitch, but they never do. Investigators need to know why such an experienced crew failed to act quickly when their plane was in danger. They suspect one reason may be the unusual nature of this flight, an acceptance flight designed to test the plane's limits.
Okay, that's good. During the turn, let's roll to 33, then to 45.
Okay.
Every time they test the plane,
Hands off now.
the automation fixes the problem.
Yep. Yes. Voila. It's all good.
Even when they hear alarms, they don't worry.
We need to overspeed.
You just want to hear the overspeed warning?
They're expecting the plane to correct the problem.
There it is. You can cancel the warning if you like.
They trusted their plane too much.
Stick forward.
Flaps up. Flaps up!
With their plane in a catastrophic stall, the 7 men aboard Flight 888 were doomed.
Oh, God! Oh, God! Damn it!
The official accident report highlights several contributing factors, including the decision to perform flight checks at low altitude.
Yeah, we need to go slow with recovery.
The report also calls for clearer rules governing acceptance flights. and more training for stall recovery. Merida Airport, Venezuela. On February 21, 2008, the crew of Santa Barbara Airlines Flight 518 arrives for the last flight of the day. Captain Aldino Garanito Gomez is a senior pilot and flight instructor for the airline with over 5,000 hours in the air. The captain's first officer today is one of his closest friends. Dennis Ferreira Quintal has over 2,000 flying hours. This afternoon, First Officer Ferreira Quintal is handling the flying.
"70 knots.
The captain monitors the instruments.
V1. And rotate. Gear up. Check. We're up.
Flight 518 is bound for Venezuela's capital, Caracas. The airline operates this 90-minute flight 3 times daily. Navigating the mountainous terrain around Merida demands a lot from pilots. The official flight plan takes planes southwest through a river valley, so they can gain height before looping back to the north and over the mountains towards Caracas. Flight 518 turns left as it climbs out of the valley. Then, 6 minutes into the flight, something begins to go wrong. An alarm is sounding a warning that the plane is dangerously close to the ground.
Santa Barbara 518, do you copy? Santa Barbara 518, please respond.
15 minutes later, Flight 518 hasn't checked in as scheduled.
Flight 518 is missing 43 passengers on board.
As daylight fades at Merida Airport, a search and rescue team gets ready to launch. When a flight goes missing, rescuers often use a plane's radar track to pinpoint its last position. But Merida Airport has no radar. The rescuers don't know where to find Flight 518.
Okay, we don't have a last known position, so the search radius here is going to be large, okay?
With no other clues to follow, they start their search by air. Then comes distressing news from high in the Andes. Mountain villagers have reported a plane crash 6 miles from Merida. There's no word about any survivors. Rescuers, carried by helicopter, arrive at Los Conejos, a remote Andes mountaintop. The air is thin, the temperature near freezing.
Let's leave our...
Hope of finding survivors in the wreckage fades quickly. The crash has killed all 46 people on board. British Airways Flight 38, a 10.5-hour journey from Beijing to London. Captain Peter Burkill has made this trip many times before.
I was operating that route a lot. It was one of my favorite flights because it was daylight. You could see the views the whole way along the route.
Burkill and First Officer John Coward both have thousands of hours flying the 777 under their belts. Flight 38's destination is Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest international airports in the world. The area's tightly packed houses come into distant view for British Airways Flight 38. The autopilot is in control as the crew lines up with runway 27 left. As it nears the ground, the plane is buffeted by some high winds. It's the first wrinkle in an otherwise smooth journey.
You'll have to turn that off for now, sir.
Sure.
Thank you.
2 minutes before landing, Coward takes over flying the plane.
You have control?
Just as the two pilots had planned.
I have control.
500 feet.
Stable?
Well, sort of.
Suddenly, there's a problem.
Pete, I can't get power on the engines. It's not giving me power. What's going on?
What do you mean? I was looking at the engine instruments and they didn't make sense to me because we were asking for full power, but the engine instruments were not giving us any power at all.
What's going on?
What?
Flight 38 is crippled in the worst way imaginable.
Well, it looks like we have double engine failure.
With neither engine providing enough power, the jet won't make it to the airport. With 152 people on board, Flight 38 is falling toward London with only seconds until it hits the ground. This close to the ground, Burkill doesn't have many options. With a crash imminent, Burkill has only one move left, but it comes with enormous risk. Retracting the flaps will reduce drag, but also lift. The plane will fly further, but drop faster. Burkill must determine which is more important. He hopes this move will help his plane avoid catastrophe.
The effect was immediate.
Now, Burkill makes the announcement every pilot dreads.
Mayday! Mayday! Speedbird! Speedbird!
I could hear the wreckage breaking up. And then we stopped. When we actually stopped, I was surprised that I was still there.
Outside in the cool January air, the scale of the disaster is clear.
The right wheel had actually been ripped off during the impact. The engines were just sad. They were all ripped apart. The cowlings were ripped off and the engines were half buried. It wasn't an aircraft anymore.
The plane narrowly missed the A-30 and the antennas at the foot of the runway. Given the amount of damage, it's incredible that only 47 people were injured.